However, what I would say is back to the Afghanistan evacuation. When real military operations kind of kick off, you do end up in the right place. So if I go back to the operating risk, we, on the C-17 in the UK, you can only fly 138 people because of the number of seats. Now that is tolerable, and the risk is managed appropriately because you've only got 138 seats, and so if people can't sit down, it's not safe. When you come to an evacuation situation, the USAF rules are you can put 350 people on the floor, strap them to the floor, and it'll be fine. That's an emergency situation, but we didn't have those rules within the Royal Air Force because we never really had to use them. And very quickly, almost within hours. So I was actually on leave, and I got asked for a review on, how many people can we take? And I went, guys, I've already fed this information in. We should follow the USAP rules, and the answer is 350 based on this evidence. Once I'd provided the evidence and it was accepted by the 2-star, that became operating risk. Okay, there's a valid justification. And so there was the, as you say, the cover your ass element. The Americans are doing this, so this is probably fine. And that became operating risk. Now, when we actually got into theatre and we started doing the evacuation, we went above 350. So there was no evidence for that. But I had my pilot saying, look, we've got 350 on board, but because there's so many babies and children, we've got loads of space. And the only thing I cared about, the 3 risks were, if you had a ground evacuation, can you get everybody out the door? Because that's important, because if you can't, then there's plenty of scenarios both in the civilian world and also in the military world where if you don't get people out of the aircraft in a ground evacuation, then people might die, smoke inhalation, things like that. So that's, can you get them out the door? The next risk was actually hypoxia. So if you have a loss of pressurization and you're up at 25,000 feet, you've got no oxygen masks because the aeroplane is not designed for that. So that's a big risk. What are you going to do? And guess what? You're going to get down, but you might not be able to get down because you might be over mountains. So that was a risk to consider. And then the final one was performance. Afghanistan, mountains, and so because we were able to consider those risks in slow time and then pass it up to the 2-star level, he was then happy to accept those risks. So that's operating risk. When we got on the ground, it was like, guys, we've got loads of space here and we've got loads of people who need to get out of Afghanistan. Can we go above 350? And that became operational risk. So the operational commander went, okay, I trust you guys, mission command, do what you think is right. It still came down to, can you fit them in safely? And do you have the performance to take off? And if you could do those 2 things, then you're clear to go. So we, I flew one sortie which had 433 people on passengers, so 445. And at the time, for about 4 days, that was the record. And then one of my mates, because I'd done that, they were desperate to beat me. Now, I didn't do that because it was like, hey, look at me. I did that to highlight that, we need to be operationally focused. And the guys took that and went, okay, that's fine. 350 is not the limit. We can go above 400. And we ended up, I think the UK record now for number of people on an air mobility aircraft is 448. Could we have done more? Yeah, probably. But actually, the limiting factor in Afghanistan at the time was actually the ability to process the passengers. So we'd managed to get into a good rhythm of, getting the right number of passengers in the right time frame. But hopefully that's highlighted a good example between that operating, that considered risk management versus we'll do what we need to on the ground.
Yeah, that's great. Because that's when you hear that in safety, like, you obviously need to be safe. We've learned a lot of lessons in blood. You don't want to forget those lessons. You want to make smart decisions, but inherently the military is taking risk. And as you alluded to, I think we all, for the last 20 years, have been operating in uncontested environments and now have forgotten that, we need to be ready to go out there and fight a peer adversary, which undoubtedly there's going to be an acceptable level of risk, which will probably be a defined number of people and planes you're willing to lose based upon each mission. And that's something that we just haven't done in quite a while. And hopefully we don't have to do. I did want to pivot because you mentioned the processing of people. And I think we'll jump into Afghanistan. So we're kind of going backwards here, but I think this is great. all the passengers you're bringing out, you guys were still bringing them out to Al Udeid as well. I've had a couple other podcasts with the C-17 crews talking about just the conditions on the ground and how long it took to process. Were you experiencing the same things as far as where you're moving passengers to? Or were you taking them to a different spot?
Yeah, we were actually taking them to a different spot. So we were going to another airport in UAE. So we were operating out of a base which was about 10 miles to the west of Dubai, and then there was another base in Dubai. So we weren't using Dubai International, but we were operating in two air bases there. One of them was an international terminal that we gained a little bit of capacity from, and we would go there, offload all of our passengers, and then they would get onto one of our Airbus A330 Voyagers and then fly over to the UK. Al Udeid was toppers. It was we've got our exchange pilot, so he's actually just flown home, but he was contributing to some of those missions, and they were, so that their limiting factor was in Al Udeid able to process the passengers, so they ended up with a load of tankers over top of Al Udeid, and then people were tanking them because they weren't landing in Al Udeid, that then flew back to Ramstein. And I understand that because of, I don't want to be coarse here, but because of the amount of feces and urine that had gone through the floor, it destroyed all the wiring, because it turns out that urine is pretty toxic and corrosive,
right?
And so I don't know where they got to, but I was told that up to 10 of those aircraft were completely screwed.
Yeah. Well, I saw some of the pictures of some of the US C-17s of the bathroom. Which, I mean, I don't even know how you get back to normal after that.
So our loggies, our J4 community and logisticians did a great job of, the movers on the ground processing the passengers in Kabul. The guys that we were liaising with out of our base that we're operating from, and then into Dubai World, and then all the way back to Bryce Norton when they offloaded the passengers. It goes all the way back to Napoleon, right? If you don't get the logistics sorted, everything else fails. And
right.
and they were epic. So we didn't have that many issues like that. They were appropriately glorified.